Hey guys, this is Thrill, and today I'm going to do a video going over the RSHL Season 25 draft, which happened last Sunday. There's actually quite a lot of people there, about 40 or so if I remember, and I think there were about 25 or something at last season's draft, so I use that as an indication that I think Draft League has kind of been a success and definitely has drove some interest up. It seems like there's been some more interest in the zone in the past couple of seasons, this season, at least so far. So hopefully that'll keep up. So, just a brief overview of the captains. So we had David, captaining Greasers, Abvolt, Mazer, Slim Reaper, with Young Money, Jowrick, Salty Puckers, Blue Goku and Banana Squadron, Haterade, African Panda, and Zeppelin is Zep gets 3 periods, and then Lawn Dwarf and Super Dance team bend the knee. So the way that they decided to do it is they did linear for the first 2 rounds of the draft, and then they did Snake for the rest. So since they were doing it that way, they decided to, I guess the BOD decided to rank the captains by who they perceived had an advantage based on the captains and co-captains combined skill level or impact. And the lowest got first pick, and then the highest got last pick. David Seaman got the first overall pick. I personally thought that Abvolt or Batman might be there, but I think some of the consensus was that since Slim Reaper was a goalie, I guess people thought that that gave his team a little bit of advantage in the draft because he didn't have to draft a goalie per se. I'm not sure I agree with that, since it's not like he's a fantastic goalie, but I can see it to a degree. And I guess between David and Abvolt, it's just kind of a toss-up. I mean, I guess you could have gone either direction on there. Maybe what tipped Abvolt to second instead of 1 is that Xanaz was his co-captain, and people think Xanaz is pretty good, so maybe they thought the combined skill of Abvolt and Xanaz was better than David and Puker. That would be my guess. So the first overall pick went to David Seaman, and of course, some of these captains, people wondered how they were going to draft, or if they're going to draft very well. Cereal Milk was David's pick, and definitely should have been the undisputed first overall pick of the draft. I would have been really surprised if anybody else was picked with that selection. Although I thought if any captain was not going to select Cereal Milk, I thought it would be David. So at least he had enough sense to do that. So obviously that's a pretty good pick there. Abvolt with the second overall pick went with Rage, which is not bad. I mean, he's a versatile player, obviously. Always been regarded as a very high impact player throughout the seasons. So if you want somebody that can play a lot of different positions at a high level, he's definitely acceptable. Honestly, aside from Cereal Milk, a lot of the first few picks are probably interchangeable depending on preference of the captain. So that's completely fine. Slim Reaper went with Doobie with the third overall pick. Doobie was the league's, didn't lead in points, but I do believe he led in goals, if I remember correctly. So he's coming off of the coattails of a good season. Also, I think a lot of the core of Slim Reaper's Young Money team was on Mazer a couple of seasons ago, and Doobie was also on that Mazer team and did well with them, so there may have been chemistry considerations going there as well. So because of that, I don't mind it very much. Skill-wise, there were still a couple of picks, say like Zach here, well, Blucka Blucka, Phil Holes, Hashik, whatever. Phil Holes, since that was the last time he used. So I was a little surprised that he didn't go with this spot. But like I said, I guess it's a preference thing more than anything else. Jowrix, with his first overall pick, chose Buckcat. I was a little bit surprised by this. Like I said, I thought that he was going to go with Phil Holes or... Sorry, checking a text on my phone. I thought that he was going to go with either Phil Holes or Mace 2-3. But he went with Buckcat. I guess part of that might have been based on Buckcat's goal scoring spree in the playoffs. It's not that bad, but I did really expect it to be Phil Holes or Mace 2-3. And I think out of those three players, Buckcat had the potential to drop the lowest. So if you were going to try to get two of those players, the way to get it probably would have been to get one of the other two and try to get Buckcat the following round. Just because Buckcat's more of a specialist player, where the other two are probably more well-rounded, I would say. But either way, it's fine. And then Image picks Phil Holes. Zach Six Blackie on the way is his name this season. This is a pretty good pick for this late. I thought that he probably would go within the first 3 or 4 picks. I mean, obviously this is still really early, but obviously this is a really good pick, stellar pick. I don't have any criticism of that. African Panda selected Thrill, myself, with the 6th overall pick. Completely fine. Like I said, a lot of it came down to preference for a few of these players, but looking at who was left after this, it seems about accurate for me to go around here. And that left Lonjor for the 7th pick with Mace 2-3. And once again, looking at what was left at this stage, probably the correct pick. In terms of overall value and last season performance. So usually, I think I did this last year, sort of when my write-ups, where I kind of said who I thought did the best and who did the worst. Best picks here, obviously Cereal Milk #1, but that's kind of a no-brainer. So if we're gonna get that off of here, I think that getting Zach at the 5th round was pretty good bargain for Blue Goku. Let's see, going to the worst pick, I thought that relatively to the rest of the picks that Buckcat was not as strong of a pick. I mean, there may have been conversations going on behind the scenes where maybe some of the players weren't getting along last season, or maybe Zach didn't told them he didn't want to play with them. I'm not sure, but I did think that both Zach and Mace 2-3 were stronger picks. But you know, it's fine. I even think he might have been able to get Buckcat in the 2nd round. He might have fallen that far. He might not have, but you know, I think there's a larger chance of Buckcat falling to this 4th pick in the 2nd round than either Zach or Mace, who for sure would have been gone by then, based on last season. Alright, going to the 2nd round, we have David picking CM Dross, which is okay. I mean, there are worse picks in this draft, but there may have been some stronger selections available. I do know that they're friends, that Dave likes CM Dross a lot, and he's been trying to get on a team with him for 3 years. And probably what the logic here was that since the snake round started in round 3, there probably was no way that CM Drost was going to fall to David's next pick, which is like, 13 picks away from this. So if he really wanted CM Drost on his team, I guess it makes sense if he wasn't willing to let him go to somebody else, because he probably would not have been available by David's next pick, which was, going to be at the end of round 3. So, makes sense why he picked him, if he definitely wanted him on his team. CM Drost had really good midfield numbers in terms of ratio last season, like still turnover ratio, but in terms of overall performance, like being able to contribute offensively and defensively, I think that he was more suited for third round maybe. But like I said, since Dave's next pick wasn't for till the end of the third round, or maybe I could have seen late second, but first pick in the second round, a little early maybe, but not too shabby. Abvolt goes with Violence. Completely fine, honestly. I think Violence has said that he didn't really plan on playing a full-time goalie this season. If he does play goalie, this is a good spot for him to go. I mean, this is a good pick for Abvolt. Violence, like I said, also very versatile. Some players don't think he's good for some reason, but he's a smart player. He knows how to cycle the puck around, and he has pretty good decision making. At least unless he's in one of his troll moods, I guess. But he can play midfield. He can play supportive style on offense. He's not going to be like probably the leading goal scorer in the league, but he'll put in some goals if you play him on offense. So, and if he's not going to play starting goalie, I do think that he's a good enough team player that if the person who regularly plays goalie misses a couple of games, he'll probably fill in for a game or two. So being able to have that person who can step up and play goalie in situations where you need it to at a pretty good level compared to the rest of the league, at least, that's pretty valuable. So I think this is a good pick here for Abvolt. Slim Reaper goes with Aceto with his second round pick. I mean, this is pretty bad. Obviously, he wants to keep the Young Money core together, but based on other people's perception of Aceto and their willingness to tolerate his personality, he just would have been available at least till the third or fourth round. I'm pretty positive of that. So I do think that this was a fairly early pick for Aceto. Not a fan of Aceto in the second round. Even if you think he's worth it skill-wise, you have to go by perception, right? Like, where is he going to go compared to what the other captains think? And looking at these other captains, I don't think the other captains have a high enough opinion of Aceto to warrant taking him this early, because I don't think he would have been taken from the Young Money roster before the next third round pick. Jowerix picks Kai. This is another really questionable pick. From what I've been seeing, Kai registered for the goalie ship. He's also been playing a lot of goalie in 5v5 and scrim, so I guess he's planning on being a full-time goalie. And Jowerix just decided he wanted to get his goalie pick out of the way. But I just feel like it's a waste, because even if you plan on using Kai as your goalie all along, it's not like there are other captains that were going to pick him up within the next round or two. You could have made a much stronger pick and still gotten Kai as your goalie, probably even in the fourth round, at least in the third. From what I've seen of him in net, it's not like he looks like a particularly strong goalie. He's obviously going to practice a lot, so I'm sure he'll improve some for the season. But like I said, even if you were going to use him as your goalie, it's not like he was going to get picked anytime in the near future to net by another captain. So, pretty early pick. Blue Goku goes with Dragon Wing 0. This is kind of a wild card pick. Like, it could end up being really valuable. It could end up being a pretty early pick because, like, this is the second round. Dragon Wing hasn't really been all that active in recent memory. And this is more of a pick based on Dragon Wing's previous accolades in the zone, probably, and not as much as his present form and status. Which, in terms of defenders, I mean, he'll probably be fine. You think he'll probably be one of the better ones if he actually shows up and plays. But to pick a player who hasn't really been around or been known to, you know, have a huge impact on the game just by himself over the past few seasons, second round is kind of an early pick. But, you know, like I said, if he does stay active and he plays, you know, like that form that he played, like early teen seasons where he was considered to be one of the better mids and defenders in the entire zone and was putting up really good performances, then it could end up being worth it. Well, not too bad. African Panda goes with Vigilante. This is a solid pick here. I mean, this is definitely who I suggested that they pick. Vigilante's a great player. The only reason he ever falls low, I mean, he fell pretty low in last season's draft because I think nobody thought he would be that active. People were at least worried about it. He ended up playing like 350 minutes, which is well over half the season. And from what I saw, he was at most of the games. And just, you know, he was on Viance's team and they rotated playing time pretty heavily. So he was at well over half the game. So as long as he has that activity level this season, I'm not concerned about it. Personally, I've always had pretty good chemistry with Vigilante, so I'm excited to play with him again. Lawn Dwarf picks up D-Money and Leafy. And these are pretty good pickups. I mean, Leafy's probably going right about where he should. If everybody picked correctly, I guess I should put that, because, I mean, obviously, he's probably a more valuable pick than some of the other picks that happened earlier on, but I think this is a fine place for him to go. And D-Money, a pretty good pick as well, because there's two considerations here. One is that he's not going to be a bad pick if he ends up being active and showing up to every game. I mean, he'll have reasonable performances, especially for, I mean, the last pick of the second round, basically a third round pick. You know, he'll give you some pretty good production for that position in the draft, I would say. And then also, you have to keep in mind that he can be traded to, you know, another team, say like Zeppelin and African Panda's team, who probably really want D-Money, and who were definitely, for sure, planning on picking him up later. I think they were thinking there was no way that he was going to get picked up in the next couple of picks, and they are worried that Vigilante might get picked up, so they decided to leave it there. And I think that was clever on Longdoor's part here, where he saw that, and so he decided to take that not only as the decent pick, but to take it away from them and to use that as maybe for potential trades. I mean, that might not end up happening. He might end up keeping him. That would be fine too. But to deny that pick from Zeppelin and Africa Panda's team was pretty intelligent. And so pretty solid back-to-back picks for you know, D-Money and Leaf by Lawn Dwarf there. African Panda goes with Arcadian, which is fine. I don't think too many people will argue that that's too bad of a pick. Looking at some of the remaining draft pool, especially, I think Arcadian has decent respect in the zone. He could be kind of a cannon, wild cannon sometimes, loose cannon, whatever. Wild card, loose cannon. Um, but you know, skill set wise, he's got some pretty decent skills, especially on the forecheck, and also pretty versatile. He can play a lot of different positions, so pretty decent pick. Blue Goku goes with Zabi. This is okay. I heard some people saying they thought this might have been a little early, but Zabi at this stage was definitely a much better pick than some of the earlier picks, in my opinion, especially like the Kai pick and Aceto. Like, Zabi here is better than those picks there, so I can't fault him too much for that. Lil Wade went to Jowrix with the 4th pick in the 3rd round. And I think this is fine. Lil Wade's stock has been going up in the past couple of seasons, and he's been, you know, raising some eyebrows here and there. And it started coming up into people's, you know, perception as a pretty good player. So I know that some players, I think a lot of captains had him on their radar as someone they were going to try to get as a steal, like in the 4th round. And being wise to that, Jowrix decided to pick him up in this 3rd round. So this is definitely a better pick than some of Jowrix's earlier picks, in my opinion. So this is fine. Slim Reaper goes with Strike. So in terms of, I guess he just wanted a goal scorer. So if you're just looking for a pure goal scorer, Strike is decent to have. So if that was the tactical thinking, then that's fine. Let's see, looking at what was still on the table, there may have been some more well-rounded players left, but probably not better pure goal scorers left. So looking at it from that point of view, I don't think this was a bad pick at all. Not too bad. So that's fine. And we have Atvolt choosing Bopmim 2. This is a little like the Dragon Wing thing, but maybe a little worse. Where I think Bop's being mainly chose on previous performances rather than current performances. I really think Bopmim 2 has been pretty bad the past couple of seasons that I've seen him play. And I definitely would not have selected him in this round. But, you know, maybe he'll be active and prove me wrong. We'll see. But, you know, it is what it is. David with the last pick of the 3rd round, picks up Sting. And then with his first pick in the 4th round, picks up Funky. So this is not too bad. Looking at what's left too. So if you're looking for, of course, he wanted to look for stay-at-home defender who is going to be active and be back there all the time, because Dave does not want to play that position. Trust me, they probably don't want Dave playing that position either. If there's anything I learned last season, is Dave is not a stay-at-home defender, right? Which is weird because he doesn't really seem to fit into other positions either. But he's not that last man back that you just have back there as your rock or the anchor, just playing stay-at-home defense. So it makes sense for him to pick up stay-at-home defenseman here. Funky, if Funky's active and shows up to games, he can definitely have an impact on the game, and this is definitely a fine place for Funky to go. So, not a bad pick by Dave. Advolt picks Mitch. See, I have mixed feelings about this because, yeah, I guess this is fine because you gotta keep in mind, I guess he hasn't really picked a goalie yet. If Violence is going to end up not goaling, and at the very least, if Violence is going to rotate goalie, you want somebody else who's going to be active and show up there. So Mitch going here, considering it's the 4th round, is probably fine. I personally think that he is overrated because he's a nice guy, and I think he's actually an awful goalie. But considering that very few people are willing to play goalie and show up, then, you know, it's not that bad because it's the 4th round. Much better than last season when he got picked in the 1st round, which was a joke. And a lot of people hounded me for saying that picking Mitch was a joke in the first round was a joke, and they thought that he always should have gone early because they thought he was a solid goalie. And then, well, you saw what happened there. It wasn't just the result of being on a bad team. He had extremely poor performance last season, and I just don't think he's very good. So, looking at what's left in the draft, and you need an active goalie, though, I guess not that bad if you're going to play defense. Like I said, this is pretty late in the fourth round, so this is fine. Personally, I would want him as my starting goalie, but I mean, you work with what you've got. Slim picks up core. I figured he would. Like I said, I mean, pretty obvious he wanted to stick with the same core players as last season. I guess a little bit confusing that he wouldn't have tried to mix things up at least a little bit, considering that, you know, they could have done better last season. It's not like they were on the cusp of winning or anything, so you think that the logic would be to try to make some improvements to the team. But, you know, he wants to stay with the same group of guys, so that's fine. Core actually had a much improved last season over some of his recent seasons, and I doubt that he would ever admit this, but I've always been pretty critical of Core in my commentaries and write-ups and stuff about my opinions of him as a player. And whether this is conscious or unconscious, I'm not sure if he'd ever admit this, but I think he's actually been working on some of the things that I've talked about, and I've seen improvement in those areas. So that could be coincidence, maybe not, but maybe he just heard it and has kind of been doing it. Maybe he consciously did it, I don't know, but he was pretty decent as a midfield option last season. Much better performance for him than I expected, and much better than I've seen from him in the past. So this isn't that bad. Jowrix goes with Weebimbo. And I've been playing some scrim with Weebimbo recently, and this is not that bad. I think that he still has some work to do, but he has decent vision on the ice. And still has some development to do. But, you know, he's fresh, he's excited to play, he's active, has potential to be a lot better, and seemed to have a pretty good attitude on Jowrix's team last Jowrix. Seen from Weebimbo recently, this is fine. Blue Goku picks Steve Cheese. I'm assuming a lot of this had to do with Banana Squadron being on the team as well, who definitely really wanted Steve Cheese. I personally picked Steve Cheese in the 5th round last season, and the idea there was for him to be a pretty decent, serviceable option as goalie to be a backup for Super Dan. Steve Cheese wasn't really very active last season in terms of playing. He mainly was contributing in, you know, administrative capacity. And, you know, I like Steve Cheese a lot, but you could tell that he has been pretty inactive the past couple of seasons, and there's maybe been a performance drop-off from earlier seasons that he's been in. So, maybe pretty early in the 4th round, but like I said, there are probably worse picks here. So if you want to make sure you get the locker room guy, get the scheduler on your team, you know, it's not that bad. African Panda picks NC Vinyl, who most people know as Mirtrix. So I'm just looking for a stay-at-home defender. He was one of the better options left. Also a nice guy, so probably a good locker room guy. I don't mind that pick here. Londorf with his back-to-back picks Cookie Wolf and TJ. So this is pretty solid. He's solidifying his back end. Cookie Wolf showed up after Sean drafted him, so it seems like he at least plans on being somewhat active this season. I know that they've played together on a team before, and Cookie Wolf seemed to have a lot of respect for Longdorf, so I don't think that there'll be some kind of situation where he doesn't show up. So, kind of just going by position and solidifying, you know, the roles here. He got some offense, and now he's solidifying the back end. Cookie Wolf, of course, a great player back in his day, and a good fundamental player, so I don't think that he would ever be all that bad in any capacity, even if he was really inactive or rusty. So, TJ, perennial pre-sitter. You know, he's fine to be back there if you need to play someone back there. So, African Panda picks Gilder, so this is obviously you know, goalie pick. Now, if Gilder can actually make games and he shows up and is active, this is actually a really good pick because Gilder's a good goalie. Of course, it is kind of a risky pick because he is European. I think the overarching, you know, kind of thought process behind this would be if he showed up for the draft, then hopefully that would mean he would show up for some games. So, if he does show up for games, then I think this is a good pick. And I think that he's probably better than a lot of the current goalies outside of, you know, the obvious great goalies like Super Dan and Cereal Milk. But most of the other goalies, I would say that Gilder is probably a stronger goalie. So, good pick if he ends up showing up. If he doesn't show up, obviously kind of a bust. But Blue Goku goes with Kula. This is fine. Kula has his moments where he does some really solid plays. He also has some really dirt moments where he'll cost your team a lot. So, I mean, you just kind of have to balance that out. But there's also been some rumors that he might be playing some more net this season. You can kind of plug him into different positions and expect maybe not fantastic performances, but pretty solid performances. So this is a decent spot for Kula to go in. Decent pick. Jowrix goes with Iggy. This is fine. Of course, Jowrix drafted Iggy last season and then traded him, so... but it seems like there's no beef or anything. Iggy not really great anywhere, but kind of like Kula, you can plug him into different positions and you'll get something out of him. So there were a couple of picks that I probably would have made before this, but like I said, a lot of that's probably preference, and I think this is an okay pick. Slim Reaper goes with Nax. So I guess he's just... This is where he's trying to get his stay-at-home defenseman who's just going to stay back all the time. And you know that he's probably going to show up to every game. And he's going to sit on the crease, so that's good, but... I don't know. I probably personally would prefer Afri to Nax, who actually Avil picked in the very next pick. So... It might have been a team culture or a team preference thing, but... Not that bad. I personally would have preferred Afri here. But if you're going for a stay-at-home defenseman. So here, alright. I might try to start skipping around here for some of these later rounds and just talk about the notable stuff, or else I'm going to be here all day. But looking here, alright, this is where David kind of starts going off the rails here. So, end of the 5th round, beginning of the 6th round. David goes with Tupac's and JDM Spoon. Honestly, I was kind of flabbergasted when I saw this. I mean, both of these players would have been available at later rounds. And if they weren't available at later rounds, I don't think that the captains who chose them would have been getting good value out of them, so I don't think it would have mattered. I think these are awful picks, personally. I mean, saw Tupac last season, like, he's not a good goalie. I mean, a lot of times he'll just lunge randomly and give an open net. I mean, it happened several times. I think I even scored probably, like, at least 3 open nets on Young Money last season from him randomly lunging at, like, the blue line. Like, you know, he looks like he's playing as a trench wars goalie when he's playing in Hockey Zone. You know, definitely don't think this is a good pick here. I guess people will argue that just since he's a goalie, that gives him some value. But there were a lot of people who actually had signed up as goalie and were saying that they planned on goaltending here. And then when you look at stuff, there's still Boss on the table. There's still Ziz on the table. Weiss had signed up as just a goalie. There's Holly Smoot. I mean, even the Wolf, who's historically been very bad. I mean, these are all people that I would have picked before Tupac's. I mean, this is like 5 or 6 rounds too early to be taking Tupac's. JDM Spoon. I think this is pretty early for him as well. He has the potential to do some decent stuff at some point in his career, I think, but has some work to do. And I mean, I just think that there were better picks here. But you know, we'll see what happens. Advolt picks Boss in the 6th round. Now this could be interesting because if Boss actually is active, and you know, is playing well and is playing a lot and twisted through a lot of games, and this is a pretty solid pick in the 6th round. I don't think Boss is ever considered the greatest goalie, but he had one pretty good season, and he definitely would be a decent option, especially compared to a lot of the other goalies we have right now, which is usually just, I mean, right, well, last season we had just Super Dan and Cereal Milk, and it was a huge drop off, right? So that would give Advolt, Mitch, Violence, and Boss, so 3 people that can play goalie. Personally, if Boss is actually super active, I would prefer him over Mitch. Either way, I mean, if he wants to make some moves to strengthen the rest of his team, he can probably trade one of these players. So, pretty solid pick in the 6th round. Now, the one caveat is I've seen Boss about 3 or 4 times over the past few years say that he's going to join a team and be active and plans on, you know, doing a lot of stuff. And then 2 or 3 games after the season starts, he just bails and disappears and he's not seen again for a year or 2. So, could be a bust, could be a good pick. We'll just have to see what Boss does here. Slim Reaper picks Trick. That's alright, I guess. Jowrix goes with Regiments in the 6th round. This is kind of like the Dragon Wing pick for Blue Goku, right? There's the potential for this to be much better than the 6th round pick, and the potential to be worse depending on if Regiment shows up and what level he's going to play at if he shows up. But looking at what's left, and considering that, you know, Regiments might have some ties to people on Jowrix's team, so it's like, you know, you might have a chance to get him to be more involved than otherwise. This is a fine pick. Blue Goku picks Idkid and the 6th round. This is okay. You got somebody who's willing to play defense. He shows up to every single game, doesn't really complain either when he doesn't get a ton of playing time. So I don't mind that at all. Africa Panda goes with 0-7. This is another player that I asked them to pick. I think he's underrated as a player. I don't think that he's a world beater. I don't think you're ever going to get anything fantastic out of him. But he doesn't make a lot of mistakes. I mean, he's like a solid mid-tier level player who will hit checks and will make passes and can read plays well enough to be involved in the play without ruining them. I mean, I think he's legitimately a decent player, and a lot of people don't really have an opinion on him. So I think he's a good pickup in this round. Lon Dwarf goes with Ziz. That's a good pickup. Gives the option of Super Dan playing out of net some if he gets too antsy in net. Also, Ziz wasn't that bad as a last man back defender from what I remember from Kick You Apart three or 4 seasons ago. Also kind of a fun guy to have around. An interesting person, at least. And then V-Flex at the beginning of the 7th round. V-Flex, another one of those guys willing to be the last man back defender. He played Levy last season and did a pretty decent job of it before he got traded away from Young Money. So this is a pretty good pick here. African Panda goes to Artos. I mean, this is pretty early for Artos, let's be honest. I mean, this is the one pick for the most part, you know, after they picked me, we started having discussions about who we should be picking with our picks. And for the most part, they respected a lot of what I was saying and went along with it. This is one where we disagreed on. I argued vehemently for them not to pick up Artos this early. I mean, I told them that if they wanted Artos, I mean, he probably would still be available later on in the round. And not to mention, I mean, do you really want Artos? But I think he's really friendly with Zeppelin, at least, or something. And he kind of has like a weird love-hate relationship with Panda, so I guess it's alright. Looking at some of the people who were picked directly after this, like Haze Cloud, Revolution. Actually, I wasn't opposed to picking up Kazi with this pick. I had thrown his name out there. You know, I wasn't a fan. But, you know, I guess there could be worse picks if he'll show up and you can force him to be goalie or something. But as long as we're not in a situation where we ever have to play him on offense because we don't have anybody else, then I guess it'll be alright. They kept arguing with me that they think he's a decent player and he's underrated. And I was like, well, maybe if you're going by ability to hit a check or something, but he misses like 80% of his passes, which makes him essentially worthless in my eyes. But, you know, we'll move on from here. Blue Goku picks up Haze Cloud. So he's got the Steve Cheese Haze Cloud package this season. If Haze Cloud shows up and plays, then obviously this is a high value pick this late in the draft. Although Haze Cloud also told me last season that he was going to show up to almost every game, and showed up to pretty much no games. So, you know, I guess it just depends on what's going to happen there, if it's going to be worth it or not. Jowrix picked Vega, so, you know, just getting a stay-at-home defender. Vega was never very good, but at this point in the draft, I think you're mainly picking up players who are going to be willing to play defense and show up when you need them to. So it's not that bad of a pick. I mean, it is the 7th round. Slim Reaper gets Revolution. I had actually told my team that over the past couple of rounds before this, I had told them they should start thinking about picking Revolution. I mean, from the things he's been saying on the forums, he plans on showing up to some games, and he was a pretty decent player back in the day when he was active. So I think my team kind of missed out there. Like, obviously, way better pick than Artos, you know, was. But, you know, I'm not sure if it was Doobie that had been pushing up for this, because I'm pretty sure Revolution was before Batman's time, but this could end up being a really solid pick at the 7th round if Revolution shows up to a lot of games, because, you know, he has decent fundamentals. He was a decent player back in the day, lots of experience. So, Volk goes with Super Saiyan in the 7th round. I mean, this is just a joke. I guess he picked him just because he thinks he's a nice guy, but if we're being completely honest, Super Saiyan shouldn't have gone until like 11th round at the earliest. I mean, he's a nice guy. Maybe that factored into it here, where he's just trying to pick guys that he likes now, but nobody else was going to pick up Super Saiyan for at least 3 more rounds. I mean, talent, you know, skill-wise, the guy is just, he's near the bottom of the totem pole. So, when you're at the 7th round, I mean, you're looking at, with 2 captains, you're still only up to 8 or 9 players on your roster. So you still need to be picking players who are going to be able to actively contribute to your team, and that's not really what Super Saiyan is. So, definitely the worst pick of this round. Uh, let's see. David Seaman picks up Memorize and Flew at the end of the 7th and 8th round. Nah, whatever. I mean, if you, at this point, you're looking at who's left. You're like, does it matter that much? Are these that bad? It's Memorize super active. Maybe he's not bad here. I personally think Flew is a cancer, so it's pretty early for him. But worse than looking at these based on individual merit, I mean, it's more like you start viewing the whole team that David put together, and you're like, what the fuck is going on here? But we'll get to that later. Advolt picks up Goldeye in the 8th round here. Goldeye signed up just to be goalie, so Advolt's kind of got a monopoly on people who said they were going to goalie. But considering the players and considering I think that other teams have at least somebody who will net, I don't think anybody's going to be that upset. I mean, this is an okay pick. This is fine. Sounds about right for Goldeye. 8th or 9th round. Big Eater picked up by Slim Reaper. I mean, yeah, this is the worst pick of this round. I mean, this is kind of like the Super Saiyan pick of the last round. I mean, maybe it's a friendship thing, you know, but I mean, I've seen the guy play. I also saw him play a lot on Nancy's team last season. This guy should have been in the 11th to 13th round. But yeah, to each their own, I guess, right? Jowrix picks Cozy up. I think Cozy is actually a pretty decent pick this late in the draft. I think he has some problems around the net sometimes, scoring goals, but fairly decent with the puck, fairly decent defensively. So in those areas, he's like just the generic warbird that will help contribute, and he's active. I think this is a pretty good pick for the 8th round. Judge 69. This is definitely early for Judge 69. He's another 11th to 13th rounder, you know, but I guess they're going for a locker room thing. African Panda picks Wheeze. Based on some of Wheeze's previous performances, this could be kind of high, but since he is playing goalie, I guess that's going to inflate the value at least a little bit. I think at this point in time, Zeppelin's team was definitely trying to make sure they were going to pick up, you know, backup goalies and backup defenders and inactive players that weren't going to show up all the time because they didn't want to have a big roster that was going to be splitting a ton of playing time. So picking up players who are just going to be nice guys who aren't going to complain a lot if they don't play a ton and will, you know, play goalie or play whatever position they're asked is definitely beneficial. So that's completely fine. Londorf picks AW and Pierre. This is where he pulled a little troll here and told people, you know, this was you kill me in Meow Mix, and Captain started freaking out. It's a pretty good troll. African Panda picks Holly Smoot here. I think Holly Smoot's a pretty good pick for the 9th round because he can be a backup goalie. And on offense, he's not that bad. You know, he can at least check people and stuff and can just be a generic terrier who's not going to be, like, detrimental to the team, I don't think. So that's pretty solid in the 9th round. I also encourage them to make this pick. Blue Goku picks up Janky, continuing to get, you know, the nice guys. I know he has some experience being on teams with Dragon Wing and Banana. They're all friends, so that's fine there. Hasn't really played a lot for the past couple of seasons, but Jowrix picks Malstry X. I think this is a pretty good pick for the 9th round if he shows up. He showed up to several games last season for Violence's team. Old school vet like Revolution. I mean, potentially any of these old school vets that are coming back, if they end up being active a lot, then getting them later in the draft is good value. So Jowrix got a pretty good deal there if Malstry continues showing up. Slim Reaper gets Frequent Flyer. So now he's got Frequent Flyer and Revolution. If both of those guys are active and show up, he could get good value out of them. Once again, I can only assume that Doobie had some impact on this, as I know that Frequent Flyer's time was definitely long before Batman 2. I mean, Frequent Flyer didn't play for quite a while. I don't remember him much outside of the old misconduct. I think I remember him on SBC is what I think I remember him most from. It's been a long time. I haven't seen him in the zone, so hopefully, since he signed up for the draft, he'll be around. That could be pretty cool. Adbulk gets antsy. Nice guy. Could plug in here and there. This isn't that bad for the 9th round. David picks up Steve Whitmer and Bonk with his 9th and 10th round. Whitmer's basically like a throwaway pick of a guy that you like, that you want to be friends with. I mean, probably would have been available in the 11th to 14th round. Not the best pick, but if you're not caring about who you're going to play, it's not that bad. Bach has not been super active, but if Bach shows up to games, he's great value for the 10th round. I mean, he's actually a pretty decent defender. So that was one of David's better picks, probably. In fact, I think Bach, would have been a decent pick at the 5th or 6th round compared to who David picked up, with Tupacs and JDM Spoon. I mean, when your 10th round pick is probably better than your 5th and 6th round pick, there's something wrong with that. But Slim Reaper, Captain Pickle. I mean, if the guy shows up, this is great value. Pretty much perennially inactive. I told my team I wouldn't mind picking up Captain Pickle just to have an inactive guy on the roster that shows up sometimes and plays, like, tell some jokes. This is fine. Oh, I missed Troy Dan. Adwell gets Troy Dan. If he's really active, pretty good value for the 10th round. Get some stream coverage, He'll score some goals. It's fine. Most of the remaining picks, this is like the end, right? So there's not much to say here. See, things of note. Sider went pretty late. He's pretty decent in terms of being a generic midfielder, so he could have gone earlier. Most of these are mascot picks. Players who probably aren't going to be active or play a lot. Advolk got Maelstrom. I feel like he's doing his best to troll Rage. Let's see here. Yeah, everybody else, they're just kind of randomly picking wherever else is left, so. I think now I'll just go and look at the rosters, the complete rosters, and kind of rank how I thought the draft went. Okay, so for Bend the Knee, I think that this is one of the better drafts. I think that based on what was available, Longdorf made some of the best picks that he could have. He got some pretty good value picks, like Cookie Wolf in the 5th round. If he's active, is going to be really good. He drafted intelligently to deny stuff from particularly making other teams get more value than they should have, like the D-Money pick. Pretty well balanced in terms of covered most of the positions pretty well. And got some decent trade value if he ever wants to make trades. And then, of course, just the innate having Longdorf and Super Dan on your team from the beginning. So, I think that they'll probably be one of the top teams this season. I think that he did a stellar job with the draft. Greasers. We have David Seaman and Puker's team. So David Seaman and Puker are the captains. Puker's a pretty decent supportive forward, but of course not a great goal scorer. David's draft, there were some picks that did not look bad, but when you look at the team as a whole, I think he did a pretty poor job. Made several bad decisions. He started making throwaway picks a little bit too early. When I talked to him about this, when he's picking Tupacs and JDM Spoon, he's like, there's nothing else left. I was just making, my, throwaway picks for the rest of the draft. And I was like, well, this is the 5th and 6th round. You're still at the point where there's only 7 or 8 players on the roster. you're still need to be picking players who are going to be important to your team. So I'm not sure what the thought process was behind some of the picks, but looking at the roster, obviously Cyril Milk with a decent defensive core gives them a chance to grind out some games. I'm just not sure where the offense is going to come from. Like I said, Puker's a supportive pass first forward. I mean, outside of his, goals that he gets from the AFK goalie on the face-off, the old Puker shot, the slap shot from center ice off of the face-off. Those are where most of his goals come from. Outside of that, he's more of like a supportive forward. CM Dross, one of other David's super early picks. Much more defensive-oriented player who's not going to contribute a whole lot around the net. Funky, a very supportive forward-style player. I mean, he can score goals, but goal scoring is definitely not his forte. He's, a system player, a team player. I mean, you look at it, and probably their best bet for scoring a bunch of goals is Flu. And when you're going that far down the list to find your goal scorer, especially for a player who, style-wise, I think is pretty cancerous to an offense. Very bad decision making. Not the worst aim in the world, but just very poor decision making that can ruin the offense. I don't see it happening for this team. So I've heard rumors that David doesn't necessarily want to keep Cyril Milk, and he might try to trade him for some value. I mean, obviously, it's kind of crazy. I mean, I've heard him say he wants to trade Cyril Milk away and use Tupac as his main goalie. Since Tupac is like a third-string goalie, that's stupid. But at the very least, if he does do that, I mean, you got to think maybe he can trade for 2 or 3 decent offensive players because he needs that. Maybe he could trade Cyril Milk for like Rage and Violence from Volt's team or something like that. I think it would be crazy to trade Cyril Milk away, but definitely needed to get some more offense. I mean, you need at least a couple of players who can bang in lots of goals for the team. So I'll go through the rest of the teams before I give like a 1 through 7 ranking, but I think Greasers is probably lower mid-tier. Maybe right in the middle, depending on how much Cyril Milk is able to carry. Haterade, pretty decent looking at the top end here. So if all these players are active, which you would assume Banana Squadron would be more active than last season since he's a captain. So you have Blue Goku, Banana Squadron, Zach, Zaby, Dragon Wing as a defender. And goalie could potentially be a question mark. I mean, is this going to be cool? Or Steve Cheese? There could be some problems there. But overall, if this team is really active and their top lines show, then they'll probably be on the top half of the league for sure. Okay, so we got Mazer, Advolt's team. God, I've been doing this for a long time. We have, so looking at the starting lineup here, first thing when I look at this roster I always think of is Advolt could not have done a better job to choose a team that would potentially make Rage hold out on him more than any other roster. I mean, you've got Violence, you've got Bop Mim 2, historically has been Rage's like arch nemesis. You got Goldeye, Maelstrom. Picked Super Saiyan in the 7th round. Could potentially have a Mitch issue to put up with, not personality-wise, but just goaltender-wise. And I know from Rage's experience playing with the Red Raven, he is not pleased with that weak-ass goalie shit. So there's always that. Good news is it looks like there are several players on Advolt's roster that can play goalie if Mitch is an issue performance-wise. You know, they can swap around there. On the whole, I don't see this team doing all that well. They could surprise me, but I definitely don't think they'll be on the top half of the league based on what I'm seeing. And if we're just basing like the actual draft and some of the picks in the draft, Advolt made probably several poor decisions. Like Super Saiyan in the 7th round is probably one of the worst picks of the draft. And rumor has it that Xanaz was kind of upset with him at this point for some of these picks, which I can't confirm, but would certainly make sense to me. Bot Mem, as early as he got him, was also pretty bad. But let's see. Salty Puckers. We'll have to see if he's able, if Jowrix is able to work out some trade magic. Honestly, I think this is one of the worst drafts. I think that Jowrix also drafted very poorly last time around. He just had the benefit of getting cereal milk, and then most of the rest of the good components of his team came through trades and the waiver wire. He got Zach off of the waiver wire. He got Buckcat in a trade. So if he wasn't able to get such a strong pick in the waiver wire and the good trades that he got, I mean, they probably would not have done very well. So he did a very good job of coaching in that sense. But in terms of the drafts, I think he did a poor job last year, and I think he did a pretty poor job this year. I mean, Kai in the 2nd round was a very poor decision. Like I said, even if you're going to use him as a full-time goalie, who was going to pick Kai up before the 3rd or 4th round? You could have strengthened your team in other areas and still picked up the goalie. And even if somebody did pick up Kai, there were like 3 or 4 other people who still could have played goalie. So that was a pretty bad pick. Buckcat as like the 4th overround pick over Zach and Mace 2-3, maybe kind of questionable. I mean, if you want to make sure you play with Buckcat over any other player in the league, I guess he felt like he was forced into that. But I think Buckcat might have been available in the 2nd round for him to pick up. I think that specialists like that, especially in Buckcat's case, can be a little bit more exposed if you're not as strong on the back end. And if you're going to compare Kai and Cereal Milk, they for sure will be a lot weaker. So, we'll see what happens. But at this point, unless he works out more trade magic like he did last season, I don't see a repeat cup performance or even a very good record at this stage. Young Money. This is about middle of the table. Just the kind of team they are. Like, I don't think this is it's kind of like last season. I don't think he had a great draft. I don't think he had a bad draft compared to some of the others, just middle of the table. And just the kind of team that Young Money has always been. They'll probably be right around the middle. They're always the kind of team that I think will do decent in the regular season because they're the kind of team that they'll beat up on the lesser teams, like the teams that are near the bottom. I don't think they're the team that is going to be making a ton of magic happen. But when they have an advantage over the other team, they'll beat them up. So because of that, they should always be able to maintain at least middle of the standings in regular seasons, I would think. And I don't foresee this being very different. So what we have a 7-team league. They'll probably be about 4th or so. 4th or 5th. Okay, and then we have Zep gets 3 peers. Oh, that team name. Okay. This was also a pretty good draft, I think. Got a pretty good active core. Got some good players. Players that have chemistry. Have done pretty well together in the past. I mean, like I said, I'm excited to play with Vigilante again. Pretty decent picks all around. Got a lot of people who can play backup goalie, like Weeze or Holly Smoot, the Wolf, even Lorne, Artos. You know, a lot of people who can potentially fill in to play net, which is an important thing. I mean, even Panda himself and Zeppelin can play very good goalie if they need to, so. Pretty balanced team, and I think that they'll probably be one of the other top teams. Draft-wise, I think the best drafts were Bend the Knee and Zepp gets 3 periods. Ass. Let's go with that. Bend the Knee and Ass, I think, had the best 2 drafts. I think that they'll probably, based on the draft, be the top 2 teams. I think Haterade is right underneath that. I think they'll be better than the rest of the league, but I just thought they were a little bit worse. Depending on how active they are and how well some of these players perform, I could see them competing for the top as well. But definitely in that top half at least. So those are probably the top 3 teams in my opinion. After that, I think we have Young Money. We'll be right in the middle of the table, like I said, beating up some of the bottom standings teams and not quite able to crack the very top tier. I think that these other 3 teams could be a toss-up. My gut is telling me that it's going to be Mazer and Salty Puckers at the bottom, but I also wouldn't be surprised if Racers were at the bottom. So this could be a toss-up. If I were to wager money on it at the moment, I mean, it's a tough call. But I could see any 3 of these teams being bottom of the league. I really think that Mazer's going to struggle this season. Unless Salty Puckers make some trades and some magic happen, I see them struggling as well. And I mean, David Seamer's team, I think everybody expected from the beginning that they probably will struggle. But they could potentially be carried higher than they would have otherwise by Cereal and Milk. Now, if you trade Cereal and Milk away, then they're probably going to be bottom. But, you know, I think that they'll be able to grind out some wins with a defensive-oriented style and such a strong goalie. So that took way longer than I wanted to do. In fact, I probably have a lot of stuff that I probably need to go do now. So, but I did tell people that I would do a video, and I didn't want to go back on that. So here's a video on what I thought of the draft, and hopefully you guys enjoyed it.